We got another episode Against the Grain podcast. I'm so excited to announce our guest, but real quick, I wanted to give you guys a chance to give. People have been asking me how they can sow in, how they can give. You can give anytime, 24/7. All you have to do is text 84321. That's the phone number to text, 84321, and just text your dollar amount. Any dollar amount, honestly, anything will be a blessing. This is all volunteer work that we're doing, so we'd love to keep bringing you guys more videos, guests, production. I mean, everything costs, everything from the smallest cable. I mean, it all comes out of our pocket. So I just want to give you guys a chance. I know people have been hitting me up to give and stuff, and thank you guys to those that have been given and stuff, that have given. We see all that. We see your comments and all that. You guys have amazing comments. I know it's been blessing so many people. So anyways, going back, text 84321, your dollar amount to give. If it's your first time signing up, all you have to type in is Harvest Time Church. Once they send you the link, you'll see our logo on there, and then you can go ahead and add your card information. And then anytime after that, all you have to do is text your dollar amount, and it'll automatically get withdrawn from your account. With that being said, I'm so excited. We got Chris in the house. Chris, welcome back to Against the Grain. I know we've been, for a while, we've been trying to, just set up a time to do it. It's just been a lot. Our schedules are crazy, and it's just been a blessing. I want to kind of go into your story, though, a little bit, and kind of introduce yourself to the church. A lot of people already know you. You lead our media team. You're all things media. You're such a blessing. I did Antoinette, your wife. I did her podcast already. That was a blessing. But let's focus on you. I'm excited to have you today. But throw us all the way back, because I want to hear your story,
man.
Kind of just your testimony, because you're doing so much now. But I want to go back to the beginning.
Very beginning. Well, definitely thank you for having me on and taking the time out to do this with me. You guys have definitely been like a huge blessing to us and our family. Beginning. So right when I first started at Harvest Time, I was back at the house, and I still remember my wife. She was like, come with me to this Bible study, and I was like, sure, I'll go. We're attending another Christian church at the time, so I'm like, I'm open to it. And I go, and it was I'm like. Man, those days were definitely like radical, like amazing, like over the top, like healing prayers and all that other stuff. But coming from a very, normal Catholic background, it was a culture shock for me, And I still remember like the second night I was there, people started, praying for healing and speaking in tongues, and like 2-hour worship sessions followed by, the message by pastor. And I'm like, man, this is a lot. So I stepped away. I'm like, yeah, this really isn't for me. Well, I would continue to go to the church that we went to on Sundays, and my wife would continue to go on Thursdays. And I noticed that I wasn't really progressing, not just with my faith, but just in life. I kind of hit a stagnant point with, my mentality, just with everything that, I was. But every week my wife just kept coming back, like, happier and happier and happier. And I'm like, man, like, what is going on? And my first instinct is like, she's seeing someone else. She has to be. There's no other explanation. There can't be any other. There's no way, God could be making her happy like this.
Yeah.
And I start going through her phone, her purse. I don't know, expecting to see like a guy's face pop out of her purse or something. And nothing. I found nothing that would indicate she was talking to anyone, If anything, I just found like, what are they called? My son loves to collect them at restaurants. They're like the Christian little.
Yeah, they call them like tracks.
There you go. Yeah, I would find those. And I'm like, what is this? And so a year passed. And sure enough, she kept getting like, in a sense, better, happier, more full of joy and just like peace. And I just was full of like resentment, anger, bitterness. So one night she came home from, the Bible study at your house. And she was, even more happier. And I pick a fight with her. Nothing crazy. I think I was just nitpicking and, just bickering over something really dumb. And she refused to argue with me. And Antoinette, like, she won't back down, especially if she knows she didn't do anything wrong. But she was like, I'm like, why won't you fight me? Like, why won't you argue with me? Like, I'm over this. Like, like, what's going on? And she was like, babe, like, I love you. Like, I don't want to fight with you anymore. And I'm like, that's it, dude. I'm done. And she was like, oh my God, she thought I was going to like leave her. And she's like, I tell her, I'm done. I can't take this no more. I'm tired of being home. I'm tired of being bitter. Like, dude, like, I feel like I'm not going anywhere in life. Like, I want what you have. I want your joy. And she just started crying. And I'm like, I want to go back with you to that Bible study. Because so far, from logically, that's the only thing different that you're doing is going to the Santiago Bible study. I'm like, so I'm going to go back. I want what you've got. And I go back, and for the first time, I'm listening to the worship, to the actual words. I'm listening to the message, with an open heart and open mind, and it completely changed my life. It just, I even can't, really fully describe like how much of an impact it's made in my life and my family's, my kids, just for them to be able to grow up in an environment like this. Like I can only imagine like how bad my life would be if I never made the decision to go back and truly like engage like with an openness, like dude, I still remember that first night, like I'm standing there, bald head, t-shirt,
looking like The Rock.
Yeah. And Andrea, your wife always makes fun of me. She's like, "Oh my God, you have no idea how hard it was to worship with this big old bald dude just like mad dogging me." And I feel so bad because like I love it now. Like I remember, dude, those worship sessions would sometimes run like 2-3 hours. Mm-hmm. And then pastor would jump on the mic, and I remember at first I was like, "Oh my God, like I got work the next morning." Yeah. Like, man, like how long now? It's somehow like, oh, what do you mean worship was only an hour? Like, come on, let's have like a full blown worship night, like 4 or 5 hours just going into it, But yeah, that's basically where I started, and it's been amazing.
And for those that don't know, like we started, like at my house, and you're saying, Santiano Bible study. We didn't even have a church at the time. Like it wasn't even going to be a church. It was literally just a Bible study. My dad's like, well, we don't really have a name, so let's just call it SBS, like Santiano Bible study, And like, yeah, little by little, people from like other churches and stuff, they would get invited. And it was just like, word of mouth, at the time, we weren't big on social media or anything. And it was just like people getting invited and stuff. And I definitely remember you guys being there. I remember like your first time and everything. Talk to us a little bit about kind of like what changed. What was the thing that really changed? Because like you said, at first you were kind of just going just to kind of check it out. And then you pretty much stopped going for a while. And then what kind of made you want to like come back to it? Like what was the thing that kind of switched it for you?
So at the time, I was going to, another church, and I would go because in hopes that I would just hear, a pastor that would make me laugh. It's almost like a 1-hour show, like on Sundays, so I can go right back into my old lifestyle habits. Because I would leave that church and then go drink like that Sunday afternoon. Like there was no conviction. There was never any type of, feeling to make me want to be better. As a man, as a husband, as a father to my kids, and after going there and, realizing that nothing in my life was changing for the better, at the time I'm working at the bank, and, all of my coworkers, they would drink, they would party, and that's what we were doing at the time. We didn't have anyone to mentor us or kind of guide us. And that's the thing, like even here, like and Anton will probably crack up at this, but like the first like few months we were there, like she invited the entire church to a bar.
Yeah. For her birthday. Right?
Yep. And like we didn't know it, but never at all in, she's been here 9, I've been here now 8, years. Has anyone ever told us like, oh, you shouldn't drink, oh, you shouldn't do drugs? Like Holy Spirit did all that. We were never you guys were never those, hitting, unsaved people over the head with the Bible saying you're going to hell because you drink. Yeah. You're going to hell because, you're going out and partying and sleeping with a bunch of people. Like you guys have never done that. If anything, like you guys loved the sin right out of us. You never ever, none of you guys have ever made us feel like guilty or condemned for the lifestyle that we had prior to coming to Harvest Time. And so after that, like I noticed like my kids started being happier. They looked forward to going to church. Like I remember being at work at Wells Fargo, and Aiden, now big Aiden, was like, he's like, Dad, are we gonna go to the pastor's house? He's like, come on, you gotta hurry up and home from work. And I actually started to want to leave work early because I would leave the bank like at 6:30 just so we could get there. It was like those days where I would hope that I wasn't working Thursdays so we could be there like as early as possible. Like I remember just being like so hungry like for the word and like God that sometimes we would get there like at 3:30, 4 o'clock just to like help, because just to be in that environment was like incredible. Yeah. Like the way my life has changed. I mean, even Lifted, I know, started because of the relationship that I grew with God, through the Bible study, and so it's just, yeah.
Talk to us about that, because we'll get into Lifted and stuff, but I want to talk about that in a second. But before we go there, you guys, we just celebrated 10 years in ministry, and it was funny because someone asked me like during that service, they were like, man, like, is there anyone that's still here? And, we have like Steph, I think she's like the original member that's still around. But then I kind of looked around and I was like, I think Chris and Antoinette are like the next ones. Like they were there like within that year that we started and stuff. So that's crazy. You guys have been super close to us. Your family's been super close to us. Like my parents, they love you guys and everything. It's awesome to see where you guys are at. Fast forward all those years now, you come in kind of like arms folded, and now it's like you lead our media team and all that. We'll get into like that, but we'll kind of go through the timeline. You started Lifted Bootcamp. Talk to us about those early days. For those that don't know, Lift is amazing boot camp in the city of Covina here, and man, so amazing. I'm a part of it, which I'm going on Monday. I just been so busy last 2 weeks. Andrea's like recording and all that. I've literally been in the warehouse like early morning setting up. It's been wild. No excuse though. I need to get back. So I'm going back on Monday. Nice. I'm a member of Lifted, but Lifted is so amazing boot camp. But it wasn't always like that. Talk to us about those early days. Talk to us about the days that you slept in your boot camp, like crazy times, right? Talk to us about kind of how that started, you leaving the bank, and then you guys staying at your boot camp, like living there. It's wild.
Watching Antoinette's podcast, we joked that she would need like a series. And honestly, it's crazy because to go over like the past like 9 years, I don't know how I can possibly squeeze it, but I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Long story short, I was working at Wells Fargo Bank, Wells Fargo payroll sales out in Woodland Hills. And I was starting to come to harvest time. And on the way home, I'm happy, making 6 figures, doing great, making good money, expense car. Like Wells Fargo was spoiling me at the time. Mm. And I'm on my way home. I still remember passing West Covina Mall, and I hear it. God's like, I need you to quit your job. And I'm like, I'm tripping. I hear it again. I need you to quit your job. And I turn off my radio, and I'm like, this is probably like the first audible conversation now I'm having with God. And I'm like, wait, why? He's like, you remember when you did that workout at the park with a bunch of the guys from church out in Baldwin Park? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I need you to start doing that. And I'm like, what? That's crazy. I'm like, that makes no sense. I don't even know how to do that. Mm. And he's like, yeah, I need you to start doing that. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, but I need you to quit your job and do this. And I'm like, but I'm making really good money. Like my family's very well taken care of. And so I figured, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can do both. So I would run classes super early, and my schedule was pretty flexible. So I'd run classes early, then go to my job out in Woodland Hills, Hollywood Hills area, come back and do classes again. I'm like, oh, it's working. I'm compromising it.
Yeah.
But that's not what God told me to do. And sure enough, when the big old Wells Fargo scandal happened, my entire, not just my position, but the entire Wells Fargo payroll was like, yeah, gone.
Wow.
And so I'm like, oh man. So then now I go from making like a little over 6 figures to making like, I don't know, at the time I maybe had 10 people who were paying me. And I was making maybe, I think $300 a month. So I go from making like thousands to $300.
Wow.
Antoinette's mom was living with me, who had just got diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
Her brother and his wife at the time were living with me. And now I'm literally only going off of what I'm making through Lifted. So now God's doing his thing, and he provides. All our bills were all paid for. We're doing great. So finally, we end up growing to the point we go to a park, we go to a martial arts studio, which was, wow. Yeah, like anyone from the church who ever went to the martial arts studio, remember that place was horrible. I mean, it just smelled like sweaty little kids and feet, like Chuck E. Cheese did back in the day. Like it was horrible, like soaking sweaty wet carpet. And it didn't matter how much I remember like when it would rain, the walls were like a blood red and the rain would seep down through the walls and bubble. It looked like a horror movie.
Oh man.
And it was horrible, but Lifted still grew. And it wasn't in a nice part of Azusa. It was like in the hood where people were getting stabbed and shot like every week. But somehow Lifted just kept growing. And for some reason, people wanted to come into that place, and finally it grew to the point where, we couldn't stay there anymore. We had like a disagreement with the owner. So we found another spot. But the problem was the rent was almost double. And I was telling Antoinette, like, babe, like, we're comfortable here where I can afford the house and Lifted. But if we move to a bigger spot, we can't keep the house. And most women I know would have been like, well, no, go get your job back.
Yeah.
And man, Antoinette, like, she is truly like my ride or die. She has been with me through so much in our marriage and our relationship. And I still remember, she told me, she's like, I will go wherever you go.
Wow. I
will follow you through whatever you want to go to. And I'm like, all right, God, I already know what you're telling me to do. So sure enough, Lyft is still around. We move into the bigger place. We lose the house. We move into the back of our gym, which I just ran to recently. And man, that was an emotional journey in itself.
Wow. We
move into our gym in the back room. It's like a 10 by 10 room, no shower. we're there for a year. And the kids, to bathe them, we would microwave water and put it into like the big blue, like, people use them for ice buckets for parties. We would use that and then get hot water from the water filter inside of our studio that was left there. And that's how we would clean bathe our kids for like, it was then 7 months that it went like that.
And you got to remember, God told you on the way home, I want you to do this. At any point, are you just like, God, I think you might have, I think you got, either I heard wrong or this word wasn't like, how many times, I don't want to say was there a time, because you must have questioned a little bit, right? I mean, how constantly was it just kind of like, did I do the right thing?
Every day. Almost crazy. Every single day I questioned it. Every day. Even before we went there and we were still running it at the park, there were nights where I would have my speaker out, sitting on my speaker with my few cones and ladders, and I'd be sitting there and no one would show. And I was so discouraged and so heartbroken. I'm like, God, really? Like, this is what you wanted me to do? And then it would start raining. It looked like a drama movie.
Like a movie.
And it would start raining. And Antoinette still, she reminds me, she's like, I was so heartbroken for you when I saw you sitting out there. Because her and the kids would stay in the car while I ran class because it was drizzling. But then it started raining and I'm sitting there with my head down. And I'm like, you know what, God? I'm going to keep going. I will keep going until I can't go no more, until you tell me to stop. So now fast forward, we're living in our gym. Finally, a really good friend of ours ended up building us this shower, who I still love him to this day for that. But it wasn't even a full shower. It was like a skeleton. It was wooden studs and then the shower insert, the lining. A rudimentary water heater that held enough water for a 3-minute warm shower. Jeez. Because we couldn't get hot water into it. And I still remember like being there. I would question it every night. I would stand behind the windows because no one could see in, seeing cars pass by. Like, God, I'm living in a gym with my family and my wife, who is now pregnant with Titus. And I'm like, we came this far. Like, I'm not going to quit now. And I could have very easily gone back to Wells Fargo, Chase. Like, my resume was like really, really good. Like, I haven't really bounced from job to job. I always stayed at a job for years. And so, I'm thinking, I'm like, I'm gonna keep going. And sure enough, it grew and grew and grew. And so finally it got big enough to the point where we could afford our own place and a gym. So we ended up moving to COVINA, and then that's where we are now.
Man. And it's crazy. Like I said, if you look at where you guys are at now, your whole situation, you wouldn't even think that, where you guys came from and stuff. Now, everyone starts from somewhere, but I haven't heard too many stories of people living in their own gym. Like, that's wild, with no shower. And then, I'm glad that they built the shower for you. I remember going in there and be like, I remember us all going in because I know you guys had to move out. I think the whole church showed up to help you guys move out of that place because of the situation or whatever. But I remember going in for the first time and seeing where you guys were at, seeing you guys slept, seeing your shower and stuff. And it hit me like, wow, like the faith is so crazy, But and like you said, some days it was just like, maybe you had zero faith, but you're like, I'm still not quitting and I'm still going forward, even though my faith meter is so low, That's crazy. I want to talk to you about your journey, kind of, you're doing well now, you're at your location and stuff. And, I love your transparency and stuff. I know you've kind of shared, a lot of people know and stuff and everything, but you kind of hit a rocky place in, what was it, like 2019, I think it was?
Yes.
2019. Talk to us a little bit about that. Because what was the timeline when you guys were doing well at Lifted? Like, what year was that when you guys like moved?
So we moved, and I think it was like maybe 2018 that we moved there. And around 2017, 2018. And we do well. It got to the point where, we outgrew the first initial place in the plaza we're at within a few months. So we then moved to a bigger spot where we packed it out. And it got to the point where, and this time I'm doing everything myself, and I'm just consumed by it. And at the time too, we're also, in ministry here. Yeah. And so, I start becoming slowly more consumed. And when I would go home, and at the time I was running these, fitness challenges, like 6-week challenges. And sometimes like on any given day, I would have like 6,000-7,000 like in my pocket, like cash. And it got to the point, we're making all this money, but I'm starting to feel like this depression start to creep on because I felt alone. Because anytime Antoinette would try to help me at the gym, she'd bring the kids because no one could watch them. Yeah. And they would just run amok and, start throwing, Titus was now, born and good. And him and Esme, and it was just a mess.
Which is a whole thing in itself. Can we talk about Titus for like 2 minutes?
Yes.
Because Titus was a crazy pregnancy. Like, Man, I remember I shared this on Antoinette's podcast. I remember going in and seeing him, and he was in the little incubator thing, and this tiny little thing. I mean, she had a crazy pregnancy. It's crazy that they even both made it through. Talk to us really quickly about that, about what were you kind of going through at the time when it was a rough situation with Titus. That's crazy.
Well, at that point, we're still living in our gym. She's pregnant with him, and she had originally gone into the hospital because she had ran into those parking things to prevent the cars from crashing into a department store at Target. And she bumped into it and she got scared, so she went to the hospital. Well, she started feeling more and more pain as the days went on, and she felt something was really wrong. And at this time, like, it's early. I think it's like 2 months before she was supposed to give birth. And she starts getting more and more pain. And so finally one day she ends up going to the hospital, like, while I go to church. And that's the thing, like, no matter what, like, I still wasn't, even through all that, we would still faithfully, Thursdays and Sundays, it was never an option. Regardless if we were living in our gym, we would wake up early just to sponge bathe and make it to church. And at this point, she had gone to the hospital just for a routine checkup. And I get a phone call. She's like, babe, he's coming now.
That was on a Thursday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that during service at the women's club.
Yes.
Yep.
And it was on a Thursday during service. And I'm like, what? I'm like, babe, it's too early. She's like, he has to come out now. His heartbeat's too fast. And I'm like, oh my God. And Aiden and Esme are with me, and I freeze. Somehow, someway, it spreads throughout the church. It's almost like service just stopped.
Yeah.
And they're
crazy.
like, dude, go. We got the kids. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even know who took my kids. And I book it to the hospital. Titus ends up, they're like, yeah, his heartbeat's too fast. At this point, I didn't really know the severity, but Antoinette and him almost die. And it was really, really hectic and really crazy. And I remember sitting in the hallway and a code blue goes off. And I know that they're back there, right? And the doctor starts, calling for a certain blood type. I'm like, oh my God, that's Antoinette's blood type. Like, what the heck is going on? And I'm there and I'm crying, I'm praying. I'm like, God, please don't take them. Like, please, like, I need her. Like, please don't do this to me right now. And a doctor comes out. She's like, all right, Mr. Richard, we're ready for you. And I'm there crying on the floor. And I'm like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah, we're ready for you. And I go in and I see Antoinette, like, because C-section, so you're awake. And I go in and she's fine. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, oh, they're about to take him out. And same way Aiden as being C-section. And I'm expecting Titus to be like, preemies are like the size of your palm. So they take him out and he's like 5.5 pounds. He's a full grown baby. I'm like, that's not a preemie. And so, but standard procedure, when the baby comes out, they clear the airway and they put oxygen. Well, because he was so young, the elasticity of his lungs hadn't developed and they popped one of his lungs. Man. So now he's dealing with a popped lung and a heartbeat that was equivalent to like a hummingbird. His heartbeat was like 300 beats a minute. Wow. And so he's in this incubator and he has tubes going in through him. And I didn't realize the severity, but he was basically on life support. He wasn't doing anything on his own. And I'm like, oh my God. So Antoinette's in the hospital. I still have Aiden and Esme. Titus is in an incubator. And all the while, I'm still running lifted. We're living in the back of our gym. And it's like, yeah, that whole thing was just crazy. But needless to say, if anyone of you guys know Titus, he's more than good. Yeah. It's funny because I was with him the other day and we were hanging out and he doesn't like wearing a shirt at home. And I see his chest and you can still see the scar.
Oh, can you?
It's right here. Yeah. Very, very visible. I'm like, dang, Pop. And he's like, what? And I'm like, do you remember that? He's like, no. I'm all, and it brought back all those memories of just watching him and seeing those tubes going through his lung just to help him breathe. Yeah.
Every time I see your boy, honestly, like I remember that time when I went to go visit him, like I said, and just seeing him in there and I was like, wow, like at the time you don't know what's going to happen, and to see where he's at now, like, I don't know. I just love that kid because I physically saw him in that state and it means something to me. So awesome. We love Titus. We love Titus so much. Amazing kid. Okay. So fast forward, you're doing well. Lifted's going great, but there's a lot of busyness, right? You kind of said you kind of felt like, a lot of depression and stuff. Talk to us kind of from there.
So at this point, Lifted is doing extremely well. Financially, we're doing great. And you wouldn't think that, well, how could you be depressed if you're doing great, right? I got to the point where I was signing up new challengers, which each process would take 15 to 20 minutes. Signing up new challengers while running a class of 35 to 40 people and training 4 to 5 private clients all within 1 hour. So I'm running like a chicken with its head cut off, signing up people. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Okay, what's your goal? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, fill this out. Give me 1 second. All right, class, you guys got 10 calories, 10 burpees, 10 sit-ups, down to 1. All right, private clients, make sure you guys are hitting legs, blah, 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 squats, step-ups, leg extensions, whatever. And this went on for like months. So finally, it got to the point where I was so overwhelmed, and I would go home, and there would be people at my house because, you know, we were just pouring into people. So in my head, I'm thinking, I'm like, you know what, God, like, I'm not going to tell Antoinette, you know, what I'm feeling, because like, we're doing good.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing stuff for the kingdom. So it's okay. Like I can handle this. And sure enough, I just break. I completely just break. And I'm not telling anyone what I'm feeling. I'm feeling depressed. I'm not anxious, but I'm just like, I felt alone. You know, I didn't tell any of you guys. I didn't tell any of the guys at church, which is why now I stress so much to like lean on your friends, especially the ones you're close with in church. You know, the guys, like, dude, trust me, because more than one person is going through what you're going through right now. And by you opening up, you could very well save someone from going through the same fate, which is why I'm very open about it now. And dang. So I'm going through all this, and I'm suicidal. You know, one night I have, I think, like $5-6 in my pocket from challenges I had signed up that day. And I'm like, you know what? Like, they'll be okay without me.
Wow.
You know, and I go on the opposite direction of Arrow Highway that the cars are coming towards to go home. And I'm like, if a car happens to hit me, then I'm not meant to be here. But if I make it home, then obviously I'm still ready to live.
Wow.
6:30 class had just ended. I leave the gym at 7:30. There's always cars on Arrow Highway. At 2 a.m, there's cars on Arrow Highway.
Yeah, it's busy.
Not a single car came my way.
Wow.
None. It's almost like the street was just completely deserted and empty. You know, and I'm like, all right, I got another day to live.
Man.
You know, it gets to that point. And now I'm bottling it up. I told no one. No one knew anything. And a client started noticing it, that I was acting weird. And they asked me repeatedly, you know, hey, coach, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Brush it off. I didn't want to open up no one. So finally, it became so repetitive that I'm like, oh, well, you know what? Maybe this person does care about me. And I opened up, and that was it. That's all it took. And long story short, I ended up having an emotional affair with someone. And somehow, some way, I thought that this person cared. And I'm like, well, if everyone really cared about me, they would notice that I wasn't doing well. So now my own mind is starting to twist things. And the paranoia starts to set in. I'm like, well, if no one cared, does that mean they ever even cared about me? Were people just using me at one point?
Yeah.
Completely crazy. Now, like in retrospect, I'm like, dude, that's insane. You know? And so all these start coming down. And now, looking back, I can see where God's like, oh no, like I need to really intervene. He sends Pastor Tilo after me, Prophetess Sylvia, Pastora, Pastor Renee. I mean, he brings out like generals.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we're not losing this dude. And sure enough, like I'm all like, wait, why? Why? Who am I? Like I'm no one. Why are you guys even trying to help me? You know? And so I'm really turning my back on everyone at this point. Me and Antoinette are about to get divorced. I didn't want to be at home anymore. I figured, I'm like, you know what? I'm the problem. So I'm just going to leave everyone, and everyone will be better off without me. Obviously, if I'm not going to kill myself, I'm going to remove myself from the equation. And during this entire time, I'm still going to church. I never missed a service, Thursday and Sunday, because it's not that it was routine, but it's where I knew that I belonged, you know? And so I would still go.
Talk about like a struggle. That's crazy.
Dude. And I remember one day, as it got to the point where like I was like really just done with life, I had several nervous breakdowns. And Antoinette, you know, tells me now that she had actually called a mental institution to take me.
Wow.
Because I wasn't acting right, you know. And it wasn't just because of the choices I was making, but she said just the conversation she would have with me, that she knew she wasn't talking to me. So somehow, somewhere, I had allowed things to overtake me willingly, you know. And I still remember one day I go to church, and it was a Sunday, and someone's there who I hadn't seen in months. So he had no clue what was going on with me. He starts sharing a testimony with me about something similar that he had gone through. And it's almost as if like snap, like I woke up.
Wow.
Like his testimony had like peeled the skin off over my eyes, and I was able to see for the first time like in a year. And I'm like, but I still could remember like all the hurt that I had been causing everyone. And I'm like, what the heck have I done? And immediately I jump up, and now at this point, Antoinette has kind of like come to the realization that she's still fighting for our marriage at this point, tooth and nail, but she is really like, he really doesn't want to be with me anymore. And I run and try to find her, and she comes out of the sunroom doors, and I just remember grabbing her. It's as if for the first time I had come up out of the water for air, and I'm holding her and smelling her hair, and I'm like, oh my God, like, and ever since then, like, it was definitely a rocky road to recovery, but we have definitely recovered, and we're 100 times stronger, which is why I stress to everyone now, especially the guys, dude, if you're feeling any type of way, please open up to your wives, open up to your boys, your friends, whoever it is, because when you internalize that and you really don't allow, you know, the people that God has placed in your life to be there for you, it will consume you, you know, and it's just, it's crazy. And like, it's funny because people think that, oh, wow, you've really overcome like the worst. I'm like, no, like even now, like we still are going through it, you know, but like now though, like with all the lessons we've learned in our past, we're applying those now, you know, when we're going through financial struggles. Yes, Christians struggle financially, who figures? You know, when we're going through financial struggles or anything else, now we know how to not just prevent it, but we know how to combat it. Because one thing that Antoinette has constantly told me, she's like, babe, she's like, the fights that you have, you know, aren't flesh and blood. It's not, you know, because you just have a disagreement or whatever. She's like, everything is a principality. You have to really think that. So fight it that way, you know, fight it with prayer, you know, go to God. You know, and that one has been like a lesson for me with the videos I've been posting recently, like really leaning on God and going to God with these things, because I've come to the realization that there's certain things I can't do on my own. But there's like a satisfaction to that, knowing that, you know what, like, yes, God made me with intent and purpose, but he also made me with just enough vulnerability to still have to lean on him. You know, and I love that.
That's good. Yeah, I just want to say real quick, thank you so much just for sharing and being vulnerable. I know a lot of people would not want to share, and not to, you know, bring shame to, you know, anything, but like they wouldn't want to share the things that you just shared right now. Like, and you're very open, not just here, you know, on your social media and stuff, even just in person. Like a lot of people have heard this story, but now sharing it here to like basically the whole world, like anyone can watch this. Like it really, really means a lot to like, to me, to those that know you, to see your journey and stuff, and just being so vulnerable, and you don't let shame or any of that stuff. Cause it's like, I believe you truly want people to learn from your experience, where you're just like, dude, you don't want people to go through the things that you've gone through. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you for doing that. You know, with these podcasts and stuff, like I know it can be very vulnerable, and, you know, I like when it's very open and everything like that, but I'm not just doing it just for, you know, the views or anything like that. Like it really means something to me, because I know someone's going to watch this and be like, dude, I'm going through that too. Like maybe it's a husband, and maybe it's a physical thing with somebody, but like you're just like, it was an emotional thing. Like a lot of people don't talk about that. Like they might think like, oh, no one knows or no one sees because it wasn't a physical thing, but like I'm emotionally attracted to somebody or something. And the Bible talks about it too. Like, you know, the Bible literally says like, if you even look at someone lustfully, like you're already like, you know, committing a sin and stuff. So it's like, you don't even have to do anything physical. So that's crazy. So again, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you though, with that and stuff, because now I see you like today, and honestly, you're an amazing father, business owner, like amazing husband and stuff. Like what advice do you have for husbands out there? Because, you know, we see it with like Sons of Courage and stuff, our men's group, like compared to like, let's say like Brave Daughters, our women's group, like there's not that many fathers anymore in church. You know, it's always, I think if you look at pretty much any church, it's a lot of single mothers, a lot of mothers, a lot of women, but the men are kind of like they're lacking and stuff. And when I look at you, I'm like, dude, I feel like you're the ultimate man, because you're like, you're big, you're strong, like you're an amazing man of faith. Like, and that's to say, I know I'm kind of jumping everywhere as that, but I'm just kind of thinking right now, you just posted a video and you kind of shared with the church too, like, you just went through this whole panic attack anxiety thing. Like you were just in the hospital last week. What was it, last week or 2 weeks ago or something? Like, I want people to know you're human. Like, it's not just this thing where it's like you come to Christ and you had your battle in 2019, you're good forever. Like you just went through it 2 weeks ago and stuff like that. So before we go through like advice for men, talk to us a little bit about what happened a couple weeks ago and what you kind of learned from that situation.
So I had just talked about the whole situation with me and my wife. That was 2019. Everyone knows what happened in 2020. That was supposed to be the year of like, you know, all this good stuff.
Yeah.
I ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks with COVID. I thought I was going to die. And then fast forward after that, now we have our business, which is like about to shutter its doors because of the pandemic, which at this point, you know, we pivot, start moving stuff outdoors and all that other good stuff. So we survived it. We recently came into an issue where financially we had a huge setback. And I mean huge, like to the point where last week I was thinking about, I'm like, I think I need to go get a job. Wow. I even told Pastor, I'm like, I think I need to go start looking for a job. And he, you know, he told me, he was like, whatever it takes. He's like, as a man, you do whatever it takes. You have family? I'm like, I got it. I literally updated resume. I went on Indeed and started applying to places because I didn't know what to do. Now, rewind a few weeks, about 2 months back, we ended up going to an Increase Summit, right, in Hawaii. And the following week, we were supposed to go on vacation again to camp out on the beach, which has been on my bucket list for like years with my family. I reserved that spot like a year ago, almost about 8 months. And we had just got back from Hawaii. The next day, I'm packing up the truck to take the kids and Antoinette camping on the beach. God tells me in the parking lot of my apartment, you can't go. And I'm like, what? Why? And I'm like, God, this is a dream of mine. Like I'm about to, and it wasn't even expensive. It was cheap. It was like $60, you know? And he was like, no, you can't go. I need you to work. And I'm like, God, I'm like, didn't you hear me? Like, this is one of my plans that I've been planning on for a long time.
Like, I'm doing this.
Yeah. Like, you know, and so I'm having this verbal argument with God in the parking lot. People thought I was crazy. And he was like, I need you to work. You just got back from vacation. I need you to apply what you learned and I need you to work right now. And I'm like, but he wasn't asking me. It's almost like he was telling me, if you don't do this, something bad is about to happen. And so I'm like, all right. So I go upstairs, I tell Antoinette, and she's like, what? I'm like, babe, literally, like, you know how much this meant to me, but God told me, and I have to. I can't. I have a feeling that if I ignore him, it's going to be really bad. She's like, okay. A few days later, we come up with the 28-day challenge. Now, I didn't realize the extent of the loss of memberships, but basically, we weren't making enough to cover one rent, not even our apartment. And so I start running numbers, and we had saved up quite a bit of money. And so now we're liquidating everything just to keep up with rent. And I sold my crypto, I sold everything, right? And so we got basically back to square zero. On top of that, we end up getting hit with a bill from the landlord because we had made a verbal agreement that we were only going to pay half the rent till July of 2022. And he was like, yeah, I know, I changed my mind. And so we end up with this bill that's like 10 grand. Wow. And so I'm like, oh my God. So now the stress is mounting and mounting and mounting. So 2 weeks ago on a Monday, I start having severe pains in my chest. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm going to die. So, of course, I did the one thing that you're never supposed to do. I Googled it. What do these symptoms mean? It's all kind of called 911 now. And so I take 2 aspirin because, you know, I heard that's what you do when you're having a heart attack. And I call Antoinette. I'm like, babe, I think I'm having a heart attack. I need you to take me now. She takes me to the hospital. They run EKGs, they run blood, they do everything because I feel like I'm dying. I had like prepared myself to be admitted for a few days because I thought that they were going to have to do something to me. The doctor comes out and she's like, all right, Mr. Saavedra, you ready to go? I'm like, oh, thank God. I'm like, babe, yeah, just tell the kids I'll be okay. She's, oh, no, you can go home. And I'm like, what? But I'm dying. And she's like, no. She's like, everything came back great. Like, you're great. Your heart's great. Your blood works great. And I'm like, but my chest. And she was like, Mrs. Saavedra, she was like, you're fine, but you need to be more mindful of your thoughts. And I'm looking at her like, and I'm thinking, I'm like, really, God? I need to get away. So just let them admit me. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's like, Mrs. Saavedra, all the tests we ran show you're fine, but your thoughts and whatever you're worried about were so strong that they made your body feel like it was dying and having a heart attack. And I'm like, man, you know, and I'm like, and then it clicks. I'm like, wait a minute. And this kind of gave me a little bit of peace was if my thoughts were so focused on the negative and stressful things and that manifested into a physical pain in my body, what would happen if I actually thought and focused on like the good things, you know, like hope and like the truth and like abundance. And I don't mean just financial, you know, that comes with everything else, but like, and I mean like free, like, you know, all like the good stuff that we want in life. What could happen? Not just like, if I can make my body feel that way, what could I possibly do if I focus on all the good stuff?
That's good.
You know? And God gives me the 28-day challenge that we ran a month ago. We brought in 60 challengers. 60, which about half stayed as regular paying members.
That's awesome.
If I would have been disobedient in that conversation with God and
About not going
and did what I wanted to do and care about my plans, Lifted as of right now would no longer even be there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, that's crazy. Like, people, like, you got to understand, like, that's crazy.
2 weeks ago. This is recent. This isn't 2019 or 2020.
And like you said, like, you had it planned. It wasn't the money of $60. Like, it's literally obedience. And Pastor talks about this all the time, like simple obedience, like it changes history. And you could think like, well, history, like the nations, it's like, no, your own business, like locally, like here, your family, like that's crazy. And then for you to go through that, what you went through, like, you know, anxiety, all that, like it's a real thing. And like I said, I love that you're very transparent and open, because I know you got on social media, you were talking about it and stuff. Like, you're an open book. Your wife is like the queen of being open. Like she's amazing, you know, but you guys are just very open, very vulnerable and stuff. And it's just, I feel like so many people find healing from that. And so many people like love you guys and relate to you guys, because you guys have a heart for people. And I really pray that like Lifted just stays open, stays blessed, and we'll plug your stuff in, you know, if you want to connect in the area and stuff, because you guys offer something so much more than just the physical. The physical is like, it's obviously we got to take care of our temples. We can go into all that, which is awesome. But like, you guys offer something so much better, and that's like the spiritual side of it. And I just want to share real quick, if anyone's watching it, it's not just like Lifted Bootcamp. You know, you come in, it's like a fire tunnel, and people are laying hands on you as you come in and sign up. You don't get a Bible as soon as you sign up. If you want one, I'm sure you guys can make it work or whatever. But they're not handing you a Bible when you first sign up and stuff. But like, you guys are there for people. And I've been there where I walk in and like, you guys are praying for somebody in the back or whatever. Like, you guys I'm sure have so many testimonies of like reaching people, and you guys have brought a lot of amazing people to church from your boot camp. Like, I think about Jerry and Monica. There's so many people that have so many stories, but that's amazing. I want to go back to my question though, about talking to men, talking to fathers.
Yes.
Like I said, when I look at you, I feel like you're like the man, you know what I mean? So, but we're not perfect. Like, you know, I know there's struggles and stuff. So, but yeah, talk to a little bit about like just the men in our generation, the men today. Encourage a man that's watching this right now that just kind of feels kind of down and out, kind of what kind of you were going through in 2019.
I think the biggest problem is for the past like 50, 60, 70 years, men have been gradually taught that they don't need anyone. Now, to be strong and independent, that's one thing. But to say that you don't need anyone is a lie. That's a straight up lie. Because, and I'm case in point where I don't mind hard work. I do not mind hard work at all. Because I believe that, you know, when you work hard and, you know, especially when you dedicate it for God, like He will bless your fruits. So I don't have a problem with hard work. But the problem is, men have been conditioned to believe that they don't need to rely on anyone. They don't need to lean on anyone. And I don't mean just physically, I mean emotionally. You know, that it's okay for us to just come home, have a few beers and just chill and not acknowledge our wife or our kids, and everything's just supposed to be fine. You know, and the problem is, as time has passed, the wife has now had to take over the household and has had to put the pants on, right? And so, but in doing that, everything gets thrown out of order because that's not her role. That was never her role to begin with. So what happens is now the man feels insecure because he no longer feels like a man. Because now the wife is the disciplinarian. She's the provider, right? And there's nothing wrong with women working. I'm all for it. Yeah. Antoinette works hard. So I'll even admit sometimes she works harder than me, you know? But when there are certain roles put into place for a reason, you know, the man is supposed to be the provider for the family, the disciplinarian. The mom is supposed to be the encourager, the nurturer for the kids. It just flows. It flows right. You know, and we didn't know that. And the reason why we know this is from experience, because that's how Antoinette was. She was the very dominant one in the relationship. She, you know, what she said goes. You know, and so I took a back burner. Of course, my insecurity kind of grew from that. But see, what's happening is men aren't opening up when they're feeling depressed, when they're feeling anxious. They've been conditioned to not tell their wives. Instead, go to the bar, turn your palms away. Go to the strip club. Go, you know, watch pornography if your wife isn't being intimate with you. You know, satisfy that temporary urge and you'll be all right. But as most guys know who are probably watching this, that's not a temporary satisfaction, because just like any drug, you continuously have to do it in order to feed those endorphins that are making you feel better for 30 seconds. You know? And so that's basically, if anything, I want to tell the man that it's okay to open up. real friends won't belittle you for being vulnerable about your emotions as a man. Because think of the negative side of that. If you don't and you end up like me, thank God I had people like the people here from Harvest Time. Thank God I had people like you, Andrea, Pastor Manuel, Pastora, Pastor Tilo, Renee, you know, like all of these amazing people to really like, nah, dude, that's not going to happen. We're not Jerry, Robert.
Yeah.
You know, Robert has been like, man, Kevin, like, dude, like, thank God I had men like this in my life to think, you know, it's okay for me to say things, you know, because like a lot of the times, you know, stigma is like, oh, dude, like you're being weak, like, you know, man up, like, you know, you don't need that. Oh, you're being soft, you know, you're oversensitive, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's other words that, you know, they can describe guys as. But of course, especially if a guy's going through it, he's like, oh man, like, now I really can't say nothing because that's what they're going to think of me.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but like case in point, like I did that. I bottled it up and it just completely deteriorated me from the inside out, my spirit, physically, like everything, you know? And so my message to all these guys is like, dude, like open up. It's okay to open up. You are not weaker because of that. You know, like that has to be exposed so it can be strengthened and cleaned out, you know, so whatever wounds are there can heal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you just keep covering it with like alcohol and drugs and sex and porn, and like, it's just going to get worse. It's a festering wound that's just going to get infected and eventually kill you, you know? And so like, it's okay. You know, it's okay to be vulnerable as a man. It's okay. You know, people think, just like you said earlier, oh, you know, once you accept Jesus, everything's great. I'm like, no. I'm like, in one of the videos I just posted, I'm like, no, my life has gotten sometimes in some aspects harder since I accepted God. You know, because now the devil's like, oh man, like he wasn't doing none of this God stuff before. He wasn't promoting or boasting about God, so I left him alone. He's like, but now he's like, no, I got to hit him. And the funny thing is, if most people look at it, especially the guys, we always get hit in the same area. It's never nothing new. Almost every single summer, I get hit in the exact same spot. And Kevin brought up a good point. He was like, well, now that you know it, he was like, dude, prepare yourself for the next summer.
I love Kevin because like he'll give little things like that. It's very simple. And you're just like, yeah, like you're right. Like it's just like so like, yeah, sometimes the stuff is so simple, but it just like it hits you in a certain way or you hear it a certain way.
Yeah.
That's good. Man, I love you, Chris, man. And, you know, fast forward to today, you're just like amazing, like I said, amazing father, business owner, but even like what you're doing with the media here, like you see it like, you know, on like Instagram and stuff, like you're behind like all the reels, putting things together, taking shots. You know, for those that don't know, you know, on, whenever we record, you're like, you know, behind our video switcher and stuff, like getting all the shots, you're like coordinating stuff. Like I wish people really could see like all that you do, because it's a lot, like even with like media and stuff. But I feel like our media has been taken even to the next level. So I'm so thankful for you for that. What do you have to, like, because I know your thing is like you love like media, video and stuff like that. What are kind of some of the things, I know there's like a lot going on right now and stuff, but what are kind of some of the things from here that you see kind of like going future, whether it's media, whether it's lifted, like what do you kind of see going forward? What are kind of some of the dreams or things that you're looking forward to, kind of like in business and stuff like that as well?
When it comes to Harvest Time and the videos that we do here, you notice like anytime something's posted, I never will repost it and put like my like give credit to myself for shooting it. And the reason for that is whenever we're doing it as a team, or even when I'm shooting the stories, I want people to see God move here. I don't want people to be like, oh dude, like Saavedra is like killer behind the camera. I don't even want them to know I'm behind the camera or anyone is behind that camera. I want them to see how God is moving through Harvest Time. I want it to be a reflection of how good God is. That's why, you know, I recently heard someone say that like to strive to be the best is a form of worship. It's not about, you know, self-glorification or like look how good I am. Because if I'm a champion and that puts me in a position to speak to millions of people, I can then say I am number one only because God has given me the strength. He's given me the wisdom. He's given me the everything I need to get to this spot. If it wasn't for, you know, Yeshua, I wouldn't even be here.
That's good.
That's, you know, and that's something I want to teach my kids. I'm like, be the best, but be the best so that you can give God the glory for it, you know? And so here, when we shoot things, like I'm so passionate about like the videos we post, because I'm like, I want people to see God here. And if that means investing in a new lens or whatever it is, like, I don't care. Like, I'll sell something of mine so I can make this look its best for God. Like if I was presenting a video to God, every single time, even if I shoot a 15-second story, I'm like, all right, God, like this is the best I could do right now.
I love that outlook on it because you know me, I'm a very perfectionist and stuff like that. And sometimes I feel like, you know, you could take that too far and you get too wrapped up in that. But I love that idea of like we give our best. And with media, I feel like you guys are doing that. Like your team is killing it on that. How do you guys like? Because even like for worship, let's say, like sometimes I see you guys and it's like you guys are worshiping in the middle of like serving and stuff like that. Like I love seeing that and stuff. But what do you guys feel like in that moment and stuff? You guys, because I've seen you do that before. Like you'll be filming, you're like raising your hand and stuff like that. Like especially when Antoinette sings, like man, you're so supportive. Even like working, you're still supporting her. It's awesome.
You know, I've had to figure out a system around that because sometimes I'd be shooting and I'll be shooting on stop, but like that urge to worship will just take me, you know? And so like now, like I have to trust that, you know, I'm like, all right, God, like, because I still want to worship him, whether I'm shooting or whether I'm singing along. Like it's huge because like you said, 1 minute I'll be shooting a clip and all of a sudden like a lyric, a line of a song will hit and I'm all shooting, I'm like, you know, start crying like out of nowhere, you know. But like it's you know, we've seen videos of even of other like churches who they encourage that. They don't want them thinking like, you know, oh, hey, just because you're shooting, like you can't worship. Like, no, you know, like it's important, you know, because even with what we do, that's the media team's form of worship, you know, is capturing those moments. Yeah. And I still remember years back, I was at another conference, I think it was Ignite, and I met another videographer there, and I had just started shooting with my camera. And I was like, hey, and he had this big old production rig on his shoulder. And I asked him like, hey, I'm like, could you look at my stuff and, you know, give me your true thoughts? And he looked at it. He was like, okay, it's great. You have a great eye, but anyone can set up a tripod and shoot a worship team. There's nothing great about that. What I want you to focus on is, yes, the worship team, because they're leading the people in worship to God. But look for those moments when someone is having, whether it's your worship leader or someone in the crowd, when they are having that intimate moment with God, not being delivered, but like that part where God just touches their heart. He's like, that's what will set you apart from everyone else. Man. And that has changed my life because that's like, if I shoot something for the gym, I could shoot all my equipment all day, but then it's just an ad. Yeah. But if I capture one of my clients giving another client a high five because they did their best, that's what sets Lifted apart. Like, wow, they encourage each other. Here, you know, yeah, like we could shoot the worship team all day long. But if we don't see the fruits of that, of what it's affecting, then it's just a music video. Dang. You know? Yeah. And so like those moments when someone is going through like a hard week and that's now captured permanently on film or memory card, they have that to look at. Like if they're going through a hard time, like, nah, I remember that day at church when I just broke down and gave it to God. You know what? I'm just going to do it again. You know? And like, and the thing is like it was last Memorial Day that Steph had asked me. She actually begged me. She got down on one knee and she was like, please, like, we need your help at the park. I remember. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But even when I wasn't on the media team and you guys were at the house, like, I remember I would even text you. I'm like, hey, you might want to change the shutter speed on that because it looks like a Spanish soap opera. Dude,
that was rough. I look back on those live videos when we were in quarantine and like, man, it wasn't the cameras, the same cameras we have now, but it was just, it was rough.
You know, and so like, but yeah, honestly, like even with this, like, you put in so much work to like all of this, like with everything you do, like your desire for perfection to make this look its best for God, and like the media team constantly learning how to get better in composition and everything, like it's just gonna get better. You know, like this, people don't realize, but like this is just the beginning. You know, I see like the media part going in a whole nother like atmosphere, you know, when it comes to like harvest time or even like with Lifted. You know, like I'm really starting to realize like how much of an impact just media in general, because, you know, we're always saying that, you know, God, Jesus is going to come back when, you know, the whole world has heard the gospel. And obviously like it would be great to travel to every continent in the planet, but the easiest way to do that is through media. Yeah, amen. You know, like, dude, the video I posted about the heart attack. Oh yeah. I looked at it before I got here. It's at like 30,000 views on TikTok. Wow. I just got on TikTok like 2 months ago.
That's crazy.
You know, and because God told me one day before church, he's like, I want you to put your video on and be vulnerable and tell people what you're feeling. And I'm like, why? That's not going to do anything. He's like, just do it. Within a week, it was at 10,000. And it was like at least 100 comments. And Sia was always saying, oh, engage. I'm like, okay. So I'm responding to these comments like, oh my God, like I'm going through the same thing. Oh my God, like this touched me. Oh my God, like I know God hears me. And I'm all like, dude, I literally just posted a video about me being too stressed. Like, you know, but it's like those times when God tells you to do something, you just got to do it. Even if it doesn't make sense, just do it, because it might not even have anything to do with you. You might be saving someone's life just by telling your testimony. You know, for them to realize that they're not alone. You know, that's a post. That's a social media post. That's now impacted 30,000 people.
It's crazy.
You know, like I could take a trip every single day of the year and still never see 30,000 people who will watch something that I made. You know, and that's why media like just has to continue to get even better, because unfortunately the attention spans of people just aren't as long. So you got to get really creative now. You really got to tap into your God-given talents and gifts to really reach people now. Yeah,
it's true. Thanks for sharing that, Chris, man. It's such a blessing. Where can people get in touch with you guys for like Lifted and stuff like that? Like I said, they're in Covina. Not only are they in Covina, I know there's people that have driven from like Pasadena. Like, what's your furthest client that you have? Like, or in like even in the past? Because I remember someone in like Pasadena a couple of times. I've known a couple people there that have said that. But you have people all over.
I've had people come from Bell Gardens, Eagle Rock.
And this is LA. Like, this is traffic.
Yeah.
Like, this is LA traffic.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Apple Valley. Ontario, I mean, Fullerton, Orange County, like they really come from everywhere. You know, and the biggest thing too is they always say, they're like, we get those messages like, hey coach, like I want to come home. You know, like even when we went to the coffee shop in Azusa that we were living at now, where we used to live at, the lady had told us, they're like, you know, it's crazy because people have been telling me about this. Her grand opening was 2 weeks ago. And people have been telling her like, hey, like I used to work out here. And she's heard stories. She's like, what do you mean you used to work out here? Like, yeah, you know, I used to work out here. She's like, no, I think you're mistaken because this used to be a spiritual place. And she's telling us this because we met her. And they're like, no, this was a gym. Like, I have pictures here. She's like, no, it was a spiritual place called Lifted.
That's hilarious.
And I'm cracking up, you know? And I'm like, dang, that's how people have described us, you know, that's to be cool. Like uplifted. But that's awesome. Yeah, Instagram is, you know, at Lifted Bootcamp, you know, Lifted Bootcamp at Gmail, liftedbootcamp.com. You know, we're in the city of Covina, but, you know, definitely our goal is to really start expanding and, you know, opening up other locations, you know, relatively with God's permission, you know, if he gives us the go ahead to really start expanding it. That's our goal. Our immediate goal is because, like you said, like we've brought in a lot of people through Lifted into harvest time because like with me, when I first went, it was like a culture shock. But like when they come to Lifted, me and Antoinette, as everyone knows, we don't act different.
Yeah.
We're the same way at Lifted as we are at church.
For sure.
So when they come here, they're like, oh, dude, this is crazy. This is just like Lifted, but it's on Thursdays and Sundays. So they feel at home and they're more inclined to like absorb it and stay. Yeah. You know, and so like the more places we can open, any help we can get is more than appreciated because we feel like we can impact a heck of a lot more people, you know, through that.
That's good. Well, thanks again, Chris, for being on here, man. Like I said, just so vulnerable, just so open, and not a lot of people would do that. So I appreciate it. I know someone that's going to watch this is going to get impacted. Honestly, every podcast that we've been shooting, I've been getting like crazy testimonies. So I know there's another one to add to the list. So thanks again. I appreciate it. With that being said, I hope you guys are so blessed by this. I encourage you guys to share this video with somebody. Share it on your social media. We're probably going to post some reels and stuff like that. I think the plan eventually is to get on TikTok for sure, get some traction there. But man, again, thank you, Chris, for being on. I appreciate him so much. Again, share this video with somebody. It's going to impact somebody. It's going to touch somebody. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. I have some amazing guests coming up there. I'm excited. I don't want to give too much away, but it's going to be good. I'm so excited to see where this channel is going. And it's all from your guys' support. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.